Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 10th session of our Youth Empowerment series. My name is Jessenia, and I'm joined here with Rijin, Hunyah, and Cynthia, and we will be your hosts for this session every week, Wednesday at 7 o'clock. For everyone who joined us last week, thank you so much for attending our session on YouTube and blogging. The recording for our previous session is now posted on our YouTube channel, so please be sure to follow us there as well as our other social media to stay up to date. So now, getting into today's topic, we will be hosting a session on women empowerment and inspiring women leaders. Our mission is to help all youth to be aware of all the inequities in our society and how we can brainstorm ideas to bridge that gap. So I'll pass it on to Rijin to go over our table of contents for today.
Yeah, so the very first one that we'll be talking about is the history. How did this all start? How has women human rights progressed over time? What are the importance of certain events and certain people? How have they impacted women in our community today? And then we'll talk about existing women leaders today. So people like Michelle Obama, Malala, and some of the characteristics that they have and what differentiates them from other leaders. Some of the key things that we should all look towards how towards having, because those are some amazing characteristics and traits that many leaders have today, and they're able to have significant impact in today's society. And so we'll talk about what the roles and what things that these leaders have done in today's society, and how has that been so important in advancing women's equality and rights in today's society. And then we'll talk about the present day challenges. What challenges do we have today in our society, and how could we resolve that together as a whole? And then we'll have a discussion together. We'll go over some of the key questions that need to be answered and ways that we can all discuss on resolving many of the issues today, and ways we can be inspired by many leaders in our community.
Women and girls are leaders, change makers, caretakers, and peacekeepers. But while they have an empowered role in our societies, to this day, women and girls are still forced to fight for their rights. How much progress have we achieved, and how much work remains? How can you carry on the fight for equal rights? Women's struggle for equal rights is centuries old. But 1848 marked a watershed moment for women's rights with the Seneca Falls Convention, where women activists publicly petitioned for their civil, social, political, and religious rights. In 1893, New Zealand sent a message to other activists across the world that equal voting rights were achievable through advocacy. Entering the 20th century, women around the world are mobilizing in ever greater numbers to campaign for gender equality. Just as women's role in the labor force is rapidly evolving by opening up options beyond caretaking roles. In 1945, the United Nations is formed in response to the destructive toll of 2 world wars, and Eleanor Roosevelt oversees the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For all the world to hear, she and other advocates underline the place of women's rights within. This sets a foundation for women's rights norms and standards at the international level. In the subsequent decades, just as women are taking historic leadership positions in government, women activists at the grassroots level dovetail with the worldwide momentum by becoming powerful symbols of feminist resistance and social change. This momentum reaches a climax in 1995 when the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action presents a visionary global agenda for women and girls' rights. But in spite of all the progress, as we enter the 21st century, patriarchal stigmas persist and exemplary leaders arise to resist them. With the rise of the digital age, social media emerges as a crucial tool to galvanize populations in the fight against injustice. A single woman's voice is now louder than ever. Grassroots activists trigger social movements online and offline, from cities to villages, inspiring future generations of women and girl leaders. After relentless campaigning, These movements generate changes in policy that signal a true shift in international attitudes and practice towards equal rights. Where are we now? A quarter century after the Beijing Declaration, women and men must mobilize together to overcome the remaining obstacles to gender equality. They must fight for an end to gender-based violence, for access to healthcare, for equal pay, and for equal participation in political life. The ink isn't dry. Be a part of generation equality, and let us continue to write history together.
So I have a riddle for you. Let's see if you can solve it. It's not a super funny riddle, so bear with me, okay? A father and son are in a horrible car crash, and tragically, the dad dies. The son is rushed to the hospital. As he's wheeled into the operating room, the surgeon looks down and says, "Stop, I can't operate on this boy. He is my son." How can this be? Exactly. The surgeon was his mother. Isn't that interesting? If you got the riddle right, you are among very, very tiny few. In a group of 200-ish undergrad students at Boston University, only 14% got the riddle right. Out of a group of youth aged 7 to 17, 15% got the riddle right. I got the riddle wrong in a women's studies class as a feminist when I was at the University of Michigan. Why? Because the mind models that we have about doctors and surgeons is that they are male. And these mind models, these things that we use to sort the barrage of information that come through our senses, they're neither good nor bad, they just are, but they're really powerful. So powerful that some of the answers that people gave included the dad, maybe he was a robot in the car, or maybe the dad was actually a father or a priest. Isn't that great? I mean, it's just wild. Even students whose mothers worked outside of the home got the riddle wrong. Even students whose mothers were doctors got the riddle wrong. That is the power of mind models. And a riddle that I have been pondering since I was a young woman in high school is the riddle of women's leadership. A riddle that confounds both men and women, and a riddle that's going to take all of us, both men and women, to solve. When I was in high school, I was a soccer player, not particularly skilled, but I played with a lot of heart. I mean, I left it all on the field. And one day, we were playing this team. We came in as the underdogs, and it started to rain, which really puts a dampener on all the girls with the fancy soccer skills. And I just emerged on the scene. I was fantastic. And I rallied my team, and ultimately, we won. And so at the next practice, my soccer coach, he commended me for what he called leadership skills, which no one had really ever used on me. And he gave me this poster. It was this Nike poster with a swoosh on it. It said leader. It had this really inspiring set of words underneath. And I hung it in my bedroom wall, and I read it, and I read it. And even though my coach had told me I was a leader, even though I had clearly demonstrated leadership skills, and even though I was a co-captain on the team, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like me. Because just like the mind model of surgeons, the mind model that we have about leadership is highly gendered male. And not just any male, white males, able-bodied males, males who come from relatively privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, males who look a lot like my husband, actually. We like them tall, I mean, I do, about 6 feet, maybe 6'2", handsome. But actually, that's proven to be true. There's privilege around what we look like. So it is any wonder that as a young girl, when we take this model of leadership that is so gendered, I mean, even the language we use around leadership, they're bold and decisive, they make tough decisions, they tell people what to do. Is it any wonder that we experience dissonance, not just ourselves, but the rest of society? I am a longtime leadership educator. I've been at Colorado State University for almost 20 years. And during that time, I have taught leadership classes, I have developed leadership curricula, and I have participated in leadership studies. And one study that was really fascinating, it was about 10 years ago, it was called the Multi-Institutional Study of Leadership. And that study was designed to figure out how best to develop the leadership capacity of college students. And it went out to thousands of students across the country, asking them, how often do you do different leadership skills like collaborate, communicate, through conflict, etc. And I remember getting the reports back, and I was intrigued to see that the women said that they were participating in these leadership skills and activities at a much higher rate than the male students. And not only that, they were reporting that they were using what are proven awesome leadership skills much more than the male students. And I thought, oh my gosh, this generation has got it figured out. And then I started flipping through the report, and I came across this concept called leader efficacy. It's similar to self-efficacy. It's how much we believe in our ability to succeed as leaders. It determines whether or not we pursue leadership positions. It determines whether or not we persist through leadership challenges. It determines whether or not we even see ourselves as leaders in the first place. And on this construct, it bottomed out. Compared to the men, the women were in the basement. So what we had here were women who were reporting using leadership skills but didn't believe in themselves as being capable of success as leaders. And then male students who were reporting, no, I don't really do these leadership skills, but I think I'm going to be an awesome leader. Women's lack of confidence is nothing new. Men's overconfidence is nothing new. But I want to emphasize that these students, they were young. They were age 18 to 22. They had yet to step foot in a corporate boardroom. They had yet to face the conflicting demands that derail so many women, the conflict of work and family. They had yet, for the most part, to experience gender bias and gender discrimination. And somehow they had learned not to believe in themselves as leaders. Sheryl Sandberg is the chief operating officer of Facebook. And she was one of the first to publicly name this phenomenon, this hesitancy to lean in, as she called it. And the numbers support her assertions. Even though women make up half the population, we're actually graduating in larger numbers than men. Even though women hold the majority of professional level jobs, we are incredibly underrepresented as leaders. In Fortune 500 companies, which are the 500 most powerful companies in the nation, if not the world, women make up 4% of the CEOs. Women hold 19% of executive level jobs. In our US Congress, women hold 20% of elected positions. Even in female-dominated professions like education, we are outnumbered at the leadership level. I have never had a high school principal or an elementary school principal or a middle school principal of my kids be anything but a man. And when I looked it up, 30% of high school principals in the US are female. That's it. And while there are certainly external barriers at play, and those are things that we must continue to push to change, there are significant internal barriers as well. And these internal barriers are the things that women like Sheryl Sandberg and women like myself are starting to speak up about and to challenge. And I'm doing it in a bit of a creative way. I've opened a school, and I'm teaching women science, the science of women's leadership. I start out with neuroscience to explain fear, because it turns out that women are afraid to lead, and they have really good reasons, but they are afraid to lead. And this fear starts young. Just last week, I saw a number that caught my breath. 1 in 3 girls are afraid to lead. 1 in 3 girls. That came out of leanin.org. Well, the brain on fear is a little messy. For those of you who are not familiar, the prefrontal cortex, which is our most highly evolved part of the brain, starts to shut down. And that survival instinct, that reptilian brain, that is all about running away, laying on the floor and playing dead, fighting back, that comes to the fore. That starts making all of the decisions. And while there are fewer and fewer physical threats that we encounter in modern society, psychological threats are quite real, and that little reptilian brain can't tell the difference. Fear is fear. So what's an example of a psychological threat? Public speaking, doing TEDx talks. Can I just tell you how terrified everyone has been in the back here? I mean, I was meditating and chanting. We're all terrified. We know that people are more afraid of public speaking than death. Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, even said that it's kind of hilarious. At a funeral, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And there are all these mind tricks to make you less afraid of public speaking, like picturing everyone in the audience in their underwear, which I'm totally not doing right now. So what fears do women face when it comes to leadership? Well, fears related to their identities, specifically stereotypes about what it is to be female and what it is to be a female leader. And for that, I turn to another science, social psychology, and the work of Dr. Claude Steele, who pioneered the study of stereotypes and their impact on performance. Stereotypes are mind models, they're generalizations, they're very negative typically. And what he found is that when someone with a stereotyped identity goes into a situation that brings that stereotype up, they experience incredible fear. It's called stereotype threat. It causes us to become hypervigilant, to second guess ourselves, to get stuck in our minds, and at worst, to choke. So what are the stereotypes that women are facing? That's a whole other TED Talk, but I'll just do a couple real quick. So the stereotypes about women are that they're not quite as intelligent as men, they're too emotional, too soft. The stereotypes about women leaders are on the other end of the spectrum. They're pushy, aggressive, or worse. You can't really win. So when you take this idea of leadership, for me to be a good leader, to be sort of masculine, I am a bad woman. And if I am a good woman, I am a bad leader. It is an impossible dilemma, and it causes enough fear in our brains for us to lean out. Stereotype threat is like swimming with sharks. Not actual real sharks, but the fear of sharks. I personally am terrified of sharks. I don't know about you, but if you were raised during the 80s and your parents let you watch Jaws, you too probably have a healthy regard for sharks. I was so terrified as a child that I would put my face mask on and look in the water before getting in. And 30 years later, I'm still afraid when I jump in the water, whether it's a freshwater lake in Vermont or the deep end of the swimming pool. I feel it. And heaven forbid I have to go to that, near the actual real ocean, which I had to when I honeymooned in Hawaii, which, as you know, is surrounded by sharks. So I did all this research about sharks. How many fatalities in the last 10 years? It's very low for those of you who are also afraid of sharks. And I mustered all my courage, and my husband was so sweet, and he encouraged me, and I went in about this deep, which is all you have to do to snorkel, and I made sure he was with me because I figured a shark would much rather eat a 200-pound man than me. And while he's tootling around and trying to point out the colorful fish, I'm trying to hold really, really still, which is super hard when you're swimming. And we are having completely different experiences in the same ocean. And the same ocean. We can say that is true for women who are in leadership positions or thinking about leadership positions. They are having vastly different experiences. What it looks like is hesitating to talk during meetings. It looks like not raising your hand for a challenging assignment, not advocating for yourself for a promotion or a raise, not applying for a job. Have you heard this awesome doozy of a number? Women feel they have to have 100% of the job qualifications before they apply. Men, 50%. What? So what if women weren't afraid to lead? What if women were taught not only how to lead, but to believe in themselves as leaders. Well, the beautiful thing about science is that in addition to using it to understand our world, we can use it to change our world. And I have 2 strategies, and they apply to both men and women. The first is to focus on your values, and I'm not being trite here. Values are as salient as your personal identity. Think about this. People live and die for their values. And the research on stereotype threat shows that if you focus on your values, it's like a shield. It's an identity shield. It protects you in those threatening environments. So I tell all women to reflect on their values before they do anything that scares you. That's what I was doing in the back, reflecting on my values. The second is to be brave, to take small actions. This is basic cognitive behavioral therapy. Take small actions. Dip your toe in the water. Snorkel with the fish. See that it isn't filled actually with sharks. They're a pretty little fish. And you will become more and more brave. And eventually, you will be able to swim with sharks, which I am able to do now. Granted, they were nurse sharks and they were at the bottom of the ocean. And those are like pet sharks, but a shark is a shark nonetheless. Men. Same thing. Focus on your values. This conversation isn't about men versus women. Are women leaders better than male leaders? This conversation is about diversity, inclusion, equality, equity. Use those to guide your actions. Be like my soccer coach and blow women's mind models of leadership by telling them that they are leaders. Blow the men's mind models too while you're at it. Be like my husband and encourage. Know that women are having vastly different experiences than men. Hire women, promote women, give women raises, put women in leadership positions, and even better yet, allow yourself to be led by women. And finally, be brave, because if we are going to dismantle these external barriers, things like gender bias, gender discrimination, sexual harassment, only you can do that. Only you can do that. So use your values and be brave in those spaces. This riddle of women's leadership is simple. Women already are leaders, and they are incredible leaders. The challenge, the riddle is how do we get them to believe it, and how do we get society to believe it? And we do that by focusing on our values and by being brave. Thank you.
Wow, well, that was so insightful. And I think really what stood out to me in that whole thing was that, there really is like a whole science behind this, and how, at one point, like this is all evolved from somewhere. And these thoughts and these initial reactions that people have when a woman is a leader, and, she really mentioned about that fear that's also in place that women have when taking a leadership role or some type of position, that maybe their voice won't be heard enough, or it won't be recognized or respected as much as one of their male counterparts. So a question that I pose to everyone is, has anyone ever felt that way, and what are some ways that we can combat that, or that you've used to help you kind of gain that confidence and that assurance in yourself, knowing that it doesn't matter your gender. If you have something to say, it's going to be valid no matter what.
I think first off, I want to say that I really like that riddle that she proposed in the beginning about what is your initial reaction to the surgeon, whether because for me, I did think it was a father and not a mother. And it's really interesting of how our minds directly think about that, because it's so ingrained in our history of mostly men being the leaders, and mostly men having certain jobs and in position in the industry. For me, I think one really great thing that my program head talked to everyone, told the class about entering the industry, is that a lot of times women are more insecure about their skill set, even though we all study the same program, we pay the same amount, and we study at the same time, we graduate at the same time, when we enter the workforce, we're still like very unsure about our skill set. And like exactly what she mentioned on her TED Talk, that women want to like know that they fit that job description 100% before even applying. And I think that's very true for me. And I think it's something that I should improve on as well. For example, when I'm applying, and like even though he had talked to everyone about this issue that happens in our industry and kind of prepared us, you don't really know how to deal with it until you're actually in that situation. So I think what helped is really thinking through if you're working a job that like doesn't necessarily benefits you as like a woman in that industry, and you're not being paid the fair amount to your counterparts, then you should really evaluate yourself, know your worth, like know that I did study to earn this certain amount, and you should aim higher than you've set yourself. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. And like now watching this video has made me like reevaluate everything as well.
I agree. And plus, it's all about gender stereotypes as one, like from the beginning, and how fear is just like something, it's like something that you have to deal with when it's about male domination, or it's about like workplace or something. It's like you could be a leader, but it's like if you're a woman and you're like on a leadership role, it could be taken as a negative thing, while as a man who's a leader, that could be taken as a positive thing. So it's like something to look at.
Agreed. Yeah. No, both of your points are so important. All right.
I was
Sorry.
gonna say the same thing, just about the idea of fear and how the way she was, metaphorically explaining that, and how, what are different ways you can kind of like, I guess, solve that fear within you to step out and, step out of your comfort zone and boundaries, and recognizing who you are as a leader. And I found that very interesting, the way she took that, the fact that, the fear of sharks, and the way she, she talked about how those are just like that fear, you can solve that just by taking small steps. And I find that as a leader, or someone who's trying to become a leader, those small steps play a crucial role, because it allows you to reevaluate who you are and the scenario that you're in. And then once you do that, it allows you to recognize, like what Cynthia says, what you're worth, your value, and how, what steps you should take after. And once again, those taking those few steps allow you to recognize, once again, who you are, and they allow you to reevaluate those fears and figure out different ways how you can step out of that comfort zone and just become who you are and the leader that you want to be.
All right. So now let's get into the next section of our session. So we'll be talking about some of the women leaders and inspiring women leaders that have never been afraid to break the glass ceiling and stand up for what they believe in.
So let's talk about Michelle Obama. Now, I'm pretty sure all you guys know who Michelle Obama is, but just in case, I'll talk about who she is more in depth. So according to the White House, Michelle Obama is the former First Lady, and she is a lawyer, a writer, and she's the wife of the 44th President Barack Obama. She is the first African-American First Lady of the United States. Through her 4 main initiatives, she became a role model for women and an advocate for healthy families, service members and their families, higher education, and international girls' education. Now, I was wondering, what character traits do you think Michelle Obama has that differentiates her from other leaders? In fact, what actually makes her a leader? Does anyone know what are some things that make her an amazing woman leader?
First off, I think she has some really good communication skills. Like when she talks, everybody wants to listen. She can get her thoughts across very well. She's also a very determined person.
Yeah, I think something else that, is really, she really encompasses is being kind and compassionate. And, she really, even though she is someone who is very determined and has, achieved a lot professionally, ultimately, and at the end of the day, she always talks about how kindness and being compassionate to others and giving is what is most important. And I think that's something that at times women can shy away from doing or can shy away from speaking about because they think that it almost softens them or doesn't make them seem as dominant or aggressive per se. But I think she does a really good job of showing all the different types of personality traits and characteristics that a woman has, and really owning every single one of it. So her style of leadership is very different than the typical type of leader that you've seen in other cases, but she really I think the compassion is something that's really stands out about her, and the confidence that she has to completely be herself and to always be willing to grow and learn more, and never be complacent or never just accept things for as they are.
I would say determination, because she's determined. She's very goal oriented, so that's one of her qualities.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say this, like to add on to what Cynthia said. The fact that her communication is what really separates her a lot, is right. It's how she inspires everyone, and I find that very very an important trait that that she has as a leader. The fact that her communication allows and allows and inspires other women leaders, to other women to be themselves, and once again push them outside their boundaries and just become the leader. And I feel like the fact that she's able to inspire them to take that step is what I find really amazing about her.
Definitely, yeah.
So another great example of women in leadership is Malala. So for those who don't know, she's a Pakistani education advocate who at the age of 17 in 2014 became the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And this was after she survived the assassination attempt by the Taliban. And for her leadership style, Malala is a visionary. So she had a vision that women should be allowed to be educated and was determined to make it happen. And she has courage, charisma, a humble personality, and also shows compassion for others. And another thing is that she also didn't come from like a high status like in society. She like brought it upon herself to become a leader and lead women, and to advocate for like equal education. So I think that's very impressive as a young woman to really take the lead and say, hey, I want a certain thing to improve, or you want to make a change and really help out all the women in her, like in the society.
Yeah, no, she came from a society that's very patriarchal and then was able to, break out of that barrier through everything that she's been through, and now is, such a role model for so many girls around the world.
And one thing to add on to that is after the assassination attempt, oftentimes it's a way of like destroying someone's hope and courage, but at the same time you see how even if that attempt was made, she kept on going and she didn't give up in her motive and her goal in bringing change and in supporting women education and fighting for women equality. And she didn't stop, and that's what I really find amazing about her as a leader, the fact that you're always determined in what you're doing and you're never giving up in any moment, regardless of what you're facing and what event, what sudden event you might face in your movement.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, now let's take a look at this video. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I'm a professional troublemaker. As my job is to critique the world, the shoddy systems, and the people who refuse to do better. As a writer, as a speaker, as a shady Nigerian, I feel like my purpose is to be this cat. am the person who's looking at other people like, I need you to fix it. That is me. I want us to leave this world better than we found it. And how I choose to affect change is by speaking up, by being the first, and by being the domino. For a line of dominoes to fall, one has to fall first, which then leaves the other choiceless to do the same. And that domino that falls, we're hoping that, okay, the next person that sees this is inspired to be a domino. Being the domino for me looks like speaking up and doing the things that are really difficult, especially when they're needed, with the hope that others will follow suit. And here's the thing. I'm the person who says what you might be thinking, but dare not to say. And a lot of times people think that we're fearless. The people who do this, we're fearless. We're not fearless. We're not unafraid of the consequences or the sacrifices that we have to make by speaking truth to power. What happens is we feel like we have to, because there are too few people in the world willing to be the domino, too few people willing to take that fall. We're not doing it without fear. Now let's talk about fear. I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. Dr. Lovey was the dream. I was Doc McStuffins before it was a thing. And I remember when I went to college, my freshman year, I had to take Chemistry 101 for my pre-med major. I got the first and last D of my academic career. So I went to my advisor and I was like, okay, let's drop the pre-med because this doctor thing is not gonna work because I don't even like hospitals. So let's just consider that done for. And that same semester, I started blogging. That was 2003. So as that one dream was ending, another was beginning. And then what was a cute hobby became my full-time job when I lost my marketing job in 2010. But it still took me 2 more years to say, I'm a writer. 9 years after I had started writing before I said, I'm a writer, because I was afraid of what happens without 401ks, without, how am I gonna keep up my shoe habit? That's important to me. So it took me that long to own this thing. That was what my purpose was. And then I realized fear has a very concrete power of keeping us from doing and saying the things that are our purpose. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let fear rule my life. I'm not gonna let fear dictate what I do. And then all these awesome things started happening and dominoes started to fall. So when I realized that, I was like, okay, 2015, I turned 30. It's gonna be my year of do it anyway. Anything that scares me, I'm gonna actively pursue it. So I'm a Capricorn. I like my feet solidly on the ground. I decided to take my first ever solo vacation, and it was out of the country to the Dominican Republic. So on my birthday, what did I do? I went zip-lining through the forest of Punta Cana. And for some odd reason, I had on business casual. Don't ask why. And I had an incredible time. Also, I don't like being submerged in water. I like to be, again, on solid ground. So I went to Mexico and swam with dolphins underwater. And then the cool thing that I did also that year that was my mountain was I wrote my book, I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual. And I had to own that whole writing thing now, right? Yes. But the very anti-me thing that I did that year that scared the crap out of me, I went skydiving. We're about to fall out the plane. I was like, I've done some stupid things in life. This is one of them. And then we come falling down to earth, and I literally lose my breath as I see earth. And I was like, I just fell out of a perfectly good plane on purpose. What is wrong with me? But then I looked down at the beauty, and I was like, this is the best thing I could have done. This is an amazing decision. And I think about the times when I have to speak truth. It feels like I am falling out that plane. It feels like that moment when I'm at the edge of the plane, and I'm like, you shouldn't do this. But then I do it anyway because I realize I have to. Sitting at the edge of that plane and kind of staying on that plane is comfort to me. And I feel like every day that I'm speaking truth against institutions and people who are bigger than me and just forces that are more powerful than me, I feel like I'm falling out of that plane. But I realize comfort is overrated because being quiet is comfortable. Keeping things the way they've been is comfortable. And all comfort has done is maintain the status quo. So we've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable by speaking these hard truths when they're necessary. And for me, though, I realized that I have to speak these truths because honesty is so important to me. My integrity is something I hold dear. Justice, I don't think justice should be an option. We should always have justice. Also, I believe in shea butter as a core value. And I think the world would be better if we were all more moisturized. But besides that, with these as my core values, I have to speak the truth. I have no other choice in the matter. But then people like me, the professional troublemakers, should not be the only ones who are committed to being these dominoes who are always falling out the planes or being the first one to take this hit. People are so afraid of these acute consequences, not realizing that there are many times when we walk in rooms and we are some of the most powerful people in those rooms. We might be the second most powerful, third most powerful. And I firmly believe that our job in those times is to disrupt what is happening. And then if we're not the most powerful, if two more of us band together, it makes us powerful. It's like co-signing the woman in the meeting, you know, the woman who can't seem to get her word out, or just making sure that other person who can't make a point is being heard. Our job is to make sure they have room for that. Everyone's well-being is community business. If we made that a point, we'd understand that for the times when we need help, we wouldn't have to look around so hard if we made sure we were somebody else's help. And there are times when I feel like I have taken very public tumbles and falls. Like a time when I was asked to speak at a conference, and they wanted me to pay my way there. And then I did some research and found out the white men who spoke there got compensated and got their travel paid for. The white women who spoke there got their travel paid for. The black women who spoke there were expected to actually pay to speak there. And I was like, what do I do? And I knew that if I spoke up about this publicly, I could face financial loss. But then I also understood that my silence serves no one. So I fearfully spoke up about it publicly, and other women started coming out to talk about, I too have faced this type of pay inequality. And it started a conversation about discriminatory pay practices that this conference was participating in. I felt like I was the domino the time I read a disturbing memoir by a public figure and wrote a piece about it. And I knew this person was more powerful than me and could impact my career. But I was like, I gotta do this. I gotta sit at the edge of this plane, maybe for 2 hours. And I did. And I pressed publish and I ran away. And I came back to a viral post and people being like, oh my God, I'm so glad somebody finally said this. And it started a conversation about mental health and self-care. And I was like, okay, all right, this thing that I'm doing, I guess, all right, it's doing something. And then so many people have been the domino when they talk about how they've been assaulted by powerful men. And it's made millions of women join in and say, me too. So shout out to Tarana Burke for igniting that movement. People and systems count on our silence to keep us exactly where we are. Now, being the domino sometimes comes down to being exactly who you are. So I've been a shady somebody since I was 3. This is me on my 3rd birthday. But I've been this girl all my life. And I feel like even that's been the domino, because in a world that wants us to walk around as representatives of ourselves, being yourself can be a revolutionary act. And in a world that wants us to whisper, I choose to yell. When it's time to say these hard things, I ask myself 3 things. 1, did you mean it? 2, can you defend it? 3, did you say it with love? If the answer is yes to all 3, I say it and let the chips fall. That's important. That checkpoint with myself always tells me, yes, you're supposed to do this. Telling the truth, telling thoughtful truth should not be a revolutionary act. Speaking truth to power should not be sacrificial, but they are. But I think if more of us chose to do this for the greater good, we'd be in better spaces than we are right now. Speaking of the greater good, I think we commit ourselves to telling truths to build bridges to common ground. And bridges that aren't based on truth will collapse. So it is our job It is our obligation, it is our duty to speak truths of power, to be the domino. Not just when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Thank you.
That was an amazing presentation that sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone to try something. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and it's always those uncomfortable conversations are the ones that are actually, groundbreaking and can actually cause change in this world. So yeah, now moving forward. So over the years, the world has gotten closer to achieving gender equality. There's better representation of women in politics, more economic opportunities, and better healthcare in many places around the world. However, the World Economic Forum still estimates that it will take another century before true gender equality becomes a reality. So despite the advancements that have been made in our society, there are still many challenging and hardships that still exist in our today. So for instance, there is still gender inequality in our workforce, including the gender pay gap. In Canada alone, for every $1 that a man makes, a woman only earns $76.8 on average, and there are over 1.5 million women in Canada that live below the poverty line. So this can lead to violence and abuse without the proper resources and support. Additionally, in many developing countries, there is still a lack of education for women, and they're made to work and provide for their family instead of attaining an education. So around the world, women still have less access to education than men, and a quarter of young women between 15 and 24 will not finish even primary school, so the most basic of education. So that group makes up 58% of the people not completing that basic education. And then of all the illiterate people in the world, 2/3 are women. So when girls are not educated on the same level of boys, it has a huge effect on the future generations and the opportunities that they will get and provide to their children as time goes on. So now I have a question for you all. Based on what I was speaking about, so despite all the advancements that are being made in our society, why do you guys believe that the issue of gender inequality is still so prevalent in our society today?
So I think that this problem has really, these issues have really become even more prevalent after COVID because of, the increase of cases of domestic violence, for example. And, there are a lot of women who hold insecure or informal jobs, and they are really majorly impacted by the pandemic because they are, in, I guess, a lower class in terms of society's industry and stuff like that. But for example, nurses as well, even though they are primarily women, and there are a lot of cases that there is inequality in pay, in their salary. And a lot of times, frontline care workers, they don't get paid at all even. A lot of women will volunteer and help. And, that's a different case for men in their industry where they are mostly leaders. So they have a higher standpoint in society. And even though we do talk about these issues, it's very hard for the society to change all at once because of lack of employment quality, for example.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that a lot of this stuff has been, ingrained for centuries. And it's really, even though progress has been made through laws and other political changes, there's always going to be that sort of pushback, when it comes to these types of things. And as she spoke about in her last video, right, these are uncomfortable things that people don't want to admit or they don't want to talk about, but there are still so many unconscious biases out there in the workforce, in school, in everyday situations with even friends or family. So
yeah, I agree too, right? I think that the biggest factor is really the mindset, the societal mindset, to be more specific, that what people think of the scenario they're in, right? To serve somebody, serve men. That the idea has been, I guess, engraved for many decades in the past. And I mean, personally, I know that, in when I go to India, I can still kind of see that, just because, when I do talk to my grandparents about some of their experiences, they don't really, they don't see um, the the idea that they can also take the leadership position. They can also, I guess, take those key steps and choices in the family to run the house type of thing. So they don't. It's been, I guess, going on for centuries, and I feel like it's really hard to change that mindset. And that's one of the biggest ways why that's an issue today. But I feel like, that's one of the things that, even though because of advancements, we're not able to get to that, is because of that, Jessenia said, the ingrained mindset, what people think of, the genders. And so, that's one of the things that as a society we have to do, right? Is how to take those steps in order to take that leadership role, right? Like she said, it's about, like the speaker in the previous TED talk. She said that you got to get comfortable by being uncomfortable, right? Yeah, that's exactly what she was saying, right? So those key steps, right? You got to make sure that when you go out of your comfort zone, because like by staying in the comfort zone, right? You're suppressing the opportunity in experiencing more that you might never experience by not taking that first step, right? So by taking that first step, you might, who knows, you might experience something bigger than what you have right now. And that's what it's all about, right? If you take that first step, you're able to foster that big change in society. And that's what we should all, strive for today. And that's what I support too, right? The taking that first step, that initiative and stepping out is really the first step for to solve many of these issues in today's society.
Yeah, for sure. No, you touched upon a lot of important points.
I was going to say domestic violence is something that's increased over the years. There's often like a lot of domestic violence cases and on that, and that's where gender equality comes in. Because like when you're in a household, or even when you're just like out there, right? It's like domestic violence occurs. You don't know when, but it's always targeted at women. So that's like something we should emphasize on gender inequality, because it's always seen as the man has more of the primary role, as a woman has a less of a human value in there. It's like something that I've also read throughout the years. It's something which I've also gotten to know. Like it's like you don't see it in news that often that we see a domestic violence case broadcasted, but even in the community, like there's always domestic violence cases going on. That's something where gender equality comes in.
Yeah, and I think even like COVID has really heightened that too, with people being home most of the time. The increase in domestic violence has definitely continue to go up. But I think when we're talking about long-term change and to get rid of those unconscious biases that have really stuck in there, it is about having those uncomfortable conversations and doing things that you wouldn't normally want to do necessarily, or things that don't seem easy, whether it's speaking to a bunch of your peers about something in fear of not being cool or not being accepted, but doing it still because that's the right thing to do and will still leave a positive impression for the future. So
yeah, I mean, one other thing that we can also touch upon is the lack of education in many countries. That's a huge factor, just because women don't really realize that there's a lot of opportunities that they, in roles that they're able to take, and by not learning about that, really suppresses that leadership role. And I feel like that lack of education is one of the crucial factors in society, right? Just because even though there are a lot of advancements, there are many other countries where education is really not provided to everyone, right? And because of that, women are not really exposed to ideas, I guess, of certain roles and things that they can take in society. And so it's almost like without the education, they're just like brought upon this idea that, okay, my role is so and so, and I can't do anything more than that. And I feel like that's one of the issues, right? You got to provide the education, and that's what we as a society should do, is that to motivate them that yes, there are so many roles that people can take in order to become a leader.
Then like another thing that I want to mention is that I'm not sure if it happens exactly here, but I have read about this in like the industry in China, where, for example, a woman they're coming in for a group interview. A lot of times, the ones that get hired are women with a personality that isn't as risk-taking and strong. Like they would choose that type of women to hire because they don't want someone who wants to, they don't want someone who has high ambition. Like they don't want someone who's going to climb all the way to the top. And one of the reasons for that is because, they'll also ask them their marital status. They'll ask them, are you married? Like, are you planning on getting married? Are you planning on having kids in the next couple of years? And they usually choose the people who are single because they know that, if they go on maternity leave, they're going to need to pay for their leave. They need to hire another person. So that is another kind of a gender bias that occurs in the industry as well.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, China was one example, but I can definitely assure you that it's still happening even in Canada today. And, speaking to my peers and stuff we've all in university doing multiple interviews and stuff, like there are those biases, and whether people want to accept it or not, it's still definitely there. And I guess that could be a whole nother discussion about like the hiring policies and system, but for sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely relevant.
Yeah, I agree. Like even like I remember like I've taken a few courses on this throughout, and there was something in there that the women who are going to be going on maternity leave, they have this whole separate criteria for them as compared to the women who are single and who are looking for a job. At the same time, they want to look for someone that isn't that ambitious at the same time. So it's like something to look at. So yeah, there could be a whole other session on that.
Yeah. Go to the next slide.
In one voice, the world declared,
Let's
human
look at
rights
some
are women's
powerful
rights.
women leadership speeches by some of the world's most well-known leaders.
In one voice, the world declared, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights.
Women are not even accepted as human beings. They are treated with injustice and inequality. Women are denied. They are neglected, even in the developed countries.
I am from Britain, and I think it is right that I am paid the same as my male counterparts. I think it is right that I should be able to make decisions about my own body.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Now looking at his watch because apparently a woman's spoken too long.
So I think right now we have the chance to be heard, and that's why we're doing it. We're all doing it because we're asking to try and elicit change.
How do we use this moment to elevate what is happening instead of continually victimize ourselves?
It's our responsibility to make this world a better place. Yes, we play sports. Yes, we play soccer. Yes, we're female athletes, but we're so much more than that.
The women's movement of this world has mellowed. Our issues and our conversation has become issues for men. I get angry when I think about it. No woman should sit down and allow a man to speak about her reproductive rights. Until you've gone through that process, I've come from Africa to tell you you don't qualify.
No country can ever truly flourish. It stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contributions of half of its citizens. That's from Michelle Obama.
Well, thank you, everyone. That pretty much wraps up our session today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to come out and join us this evening, and we hope that the session was informative to you all. So please stay connected to Youth for Change using our social media. Please like and subscribe. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel, where we will be posting this recorded session tomorrow. So we would love your feedback on this session and any ideas for future sessions in the coming week. So now to briefly introduce our next session, I'll pass it over to Cynthia to give an introduction for that.
Yeah, so next Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll be hosting a youth talent show. So if you or anyone you know is interested in participating, please send us an email or DM us or message us on Instagram and Facebook to get involved. We're excited to show off our amazing youth talent from all over Canada. So we want to thank you for joining us, and we'd love to see you all again next week. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.